Shall we get started and we can do the official introductions, and that way we can share a little bit more about Margaret and Megla.
Cool.
Awesome, guys. Well, welcome to our Sourcing and Manufacturing in India webinar, kindly brought to you by Proboxx. I'm your host, Amanda, and Proboxx is your all-in-one digital logistics portal, where you can manage all your quotes, your shipments, all your documents, your reporting, chat to the team, streamline workflows, and save on costs, all available 24/7 at the touch of a button. And before I introduce the guest speakers, I just want to say thank you to the participants that are joining us live. Please keep your audio on mute. And if you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat. We love questions, so feel free to just blast us with the questions as we go along. And I'll keep an eye on the chat so that we can share that with Megla and Margaret. And I want to introduce Megla and Margaret and just share a little bit more about them. And of course, to Amit, who is our CEO of Proboxx as well. Now, Megla has over 20 years of experience in sourcing in India, and she's super passionate about helping global importers source products from India. She's the co-founder of India Sourcing Network and also organizes the Ecom India Summit, which is an expo focused entirely on ecom exports. Welcome, Megla.
Thank you so much, Amanda and Amit, for inviting us here today. Super excited for this session.
Yeah, we are too. We're so honored to have you. And Margaret is actually Megla's business partner and a successful and experienced Amazon seller in her own right. And she's been actively buying products from India for over 4 years. And she's also a coach on the India sourcing trip, which we're going to hear more about later, and is a mentor to e-commerce sellers. Welcome, Margaret.
Thank you very much, Amanda. It's a pleasure to be here and join all your members. Hopefully we've got a few more coming in now.
Yeah, thanks, Margaret. Yeah, we've got a few joining right now. And we have Amit. Amit has more than 15 years of experience in logistics management. Amit successfully navigates complex global supply chains, develops comprehensive strategies to streamline processes, improve productivity, and save costs for clients. Welcome, Amit.
Thank you, Amanda. How are you?
I'm good. Very, very chilly here today, but I've got my chai tea here in the spirit of India. So I'm going to have a Maui chat. So I think let's just get into it. And for the guys that are actually joining us as well live, please stay to the end because we have some amazing offers for you guys, really incredible discounts. So first questions to Margaret and Megla. Why source and manufacture in India?
Okay, well, I would say number one is the difference you can get in the products, because a lot of the products are handmade and the materials are very different. I think Indian suppliers are great at matching up. You might get a product made out of wood, resin, and metal all in one. And so you get a lot of big differences. And I could honestly say I've been selling the same products on Amazon since 2018, and I don't have anybody who sells exactly the same product. Like, it's not like they've gone, you go on Alibaba and you find it and everyone starts selling it. People sell similar products, but nothing exactly from my manufacturer. So I find the fact that, that's a long time to, not have people jumping on. And that the reason is that the websites are not so full of products. There's not like a lot on Alibaba. So you need to really go to the manufacturer and see what they've got. And a lot of them don't even have a lot of the products on their website. So I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons. And obviously the products being handmade, it's an awesome brand story. Get a video of, someone in a village making something for you and things like that. So I think, that's probably, I think, the biggest and the best thing about sourcing from India. Do you want to add some more, Megla, to that?
Yeah, I think another advantage is low MOQs. So when you're sourcing products from India, especially in the handmade category, you can source in smaller quantities. Like a lot of the metal and wooden products that are offered can be sourced in as low as 100 pieces as well. Although we don't recommend sourcing in such small quantities because it's not very cost effective to ship them. However, you can also order, some suppliers also have an MOV, or a minimum order value. And what that basically means is that you can mix and match various SKUs in order to meet their minimum order value. And they might say that, okay, you can order $5,000 worth of products and you can have, 50 pieces of this, 10 pieces of this, and you can have a variety of SKUs. So that's very advantageous if you're just starting out or if you have limited capital, you can, test different, a variety of SKUs and see what really works well. Also, I think communication is much easier when you're sourcing from India because English is, spoken by most suppliers. And so you can just pick up the phone, have a call with them, do a WhatsApp video call. It's easier to communicate. I think in China, sometimes things get lost in translation and suppliers tend not to, be very comfortable talking on the phone, just as an example.
Yes.
Also, trade tariffs. I think that's another big advantage sourcing from India. And that's one reason why many Amazon sellers and other bigger companies are also diversifying out of China, because there are these additional, Trump tariffs on many products that are imported from China into the US, but there are no such tariffs from products from India.
That's
I think
savings for
Lastly, lower labor costs. So in China, production costs and labor costs have been increasing over the last, 5-10 years, but India still has significantly lower labor costs. And that is one big advantage, especially if you're sourcing products that do require a lot of, that are labor intensive. For example, you have bags or garments. In fact, a lot of the bigger garment manufacturers have been moving out of China for quite a few years. They've been looking for lower cost alternatives like Vietnam, Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka. So if you do have a product that is labor intensive, you may find that prices are lower in India.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
Amanda, if I can elaborate and ask like Margaret and Magda also a question on what they described. So what I would like to elaborate is on the HTS code. So what Magda said here is 100% true, and like try to maybe elaborate on this a little bit further. So one of the biggest issue I found out with most sellers that they are not doing any classification before even starting production. And what happens later on, that like they produce in China, they think, okay, whatever, they don't even think about like the tariff and the duty percentage that you will have to pay once cargo arrives to the US. And after they basically manufacture, they approach the freight forwarder, ask, okay, what's going to be the HTS code? And then they understand that, oh, there is like Trump tariff applied there, 7.5% additional, or even worse, 25%. And what happened that afterwards they say, okay, now I have to pay, I don't know, 28, 35% duty. And they didn't calculate it on their like cost, on their product cost when they want basically to sell the product. And then basically all of the margin is disappear. So I think it's super, super critical. One is to verify the HTS code and what's going to be the duty percentage and the terms of like India compared to China. So that's a huge, huge factor, especially for products that have those Trump tariff on them. So that's one. Second, I would like to ask Margaret and Magda, in terms of communication, I think like the Chinese at that moment of time, at least from my experience as a freight forwarder, yeah, maybe they have like a worse English, okay, compared to the Indian for sure, but they are very accustomed like to be like in business wise, right, in a business environment. And sometimes it's easier to connect with those suppliers, ship the goods out. How do you find this issue compare like talking, have negotiation with the Indian factories compared to the Chinese in general?
Look, I find it's much easier actually to deal in India. I did start off sourcing from China pre-moving to India in 2018, and I just couldn't believe the difference. It's so nice to actually get on a Zoom call and speak to a supplier and, look them in the face and talk to them. I think, I never ever could get anybody to actually turn their phone on and look at me. And I find that really uncomfortable. I mean, you like to know who you're talking to and, show your products. If you're doing a sample, you can virtually work through your sample over a few days, say to them, no, go and tweak that and show it to me. I mean, you still need to get that final sample sent, but it saves you so much time. So I think like the whole communication and I think the Indians are more interested in asking you about your family. Like they don't just jump on a call. It's, what have you been doing? Where have you been? And you get to know, like, I know about my supplier's family. I've actually been to their home. We've met, grandpa and the dog. And so you've become part of their life. So it's a big difference. And I think that's a nicer way of doing business than just having that real transactional, I want your money. And that's another thing I find. It's so much easier. Like quite often my stock has been in the States and I still haven't paid for the product. And I'll say, oh, you haven't sent me a bill. Oh, it's coming. Whereas I'm dealing with China, I would pay them. I would send my bank receipt. And a week later, they're still saying to me, oh, it's got to be cleared by the chief accountant and all this. And so you've just got so much time delay that you don't anticipate. So I find all those things much better. Megla, have you got anything more you'd like to?
Yeah, I think you've covered quite a lot of it, Mark.
Yeah.
So would you say then on the whole that building relationships and actually having a great connection with your buyer-supplier relationship is more important in India than China?
Definitely.
Yes, definitely. I think in India, there's a lot more focus on relationships and, many times we find suppliers, they maybe don't want to work with a certain buyer because they don't get along or because, the buyer has unreasonable sort of requests. So, a lot of it is based on relationships. And in fact, when you reach out to a supplier, sometimes they will ask you about your background. They'll want to get on a Zoom call with you, a video call, and understand your business requirements and what your business focus is. And then they will try to, offer you products or customize products for you based on your requirements. And they'll give you suggestions on what you can do and how you can, present your products. So whereas in China, generally, if you reach out to a supplier, they'll just come back and give you a quote, right? They don't care who you are as long as you are. But in India, I find that a lot of the suppliers, they do want to develop a long-term relationship with buyers.
That's awesome. So even if you're just small starting out, they still want to give you the time of day and really, help you, which is kind of different from my experience I've had sometimes working with suppliers in China. If I'm not Nike or, Canon or whatever, it's like, they don't want to talk.
No, I think
hey, Amanda, I'm working with the Chinese basically on a daily basis for like, I don't know how many years. Every time, like, the conversation start is by how can I help you? Like nothing personal, never. Like just if you're gonna meet them like in person, so they're gonna be like conversation about family and so on. But like on a day-to-day basis, it's all about business with the Chinese, like in comparison to like what Megla and Margaret say about India, which is totally different.
Yeah, sounds super refreshing and nice to hear. So would you say then that when it comes to negotiating costs and reducing, overheads and things like that, are they open to doing a deal or negotiating on terms when it comes to things like that?
Yeah, look, and I think they are, but I mean, to me, I think you need to build that relationship first. I mean, I think, if you send them an email and say, I just want to order 200 of these, and then you go back and say, can you reduce the price? I want it cheaper. You're probably not going to win. You need to prove to them that, you are a long-term customer. And, with that repeat business, I think you get so much, more sort of value back from them than trying to sort of go in on your first shipment. I think you've got to really work your way through and prove what you're doing. And look, I find with my manufacturer, I haven't really gone back and said I want less off, but things like they'll just say to me, oh, we've designed your boxes for your new product, it's all done. I've never paid for any of that. I don't pay additional for gift boxing, like things like that. So it works both ways, and then I don't ever pay a deposit. So I think if you get the relationship going, then's the time to get the extra things, whether it be $1 off or your packaging for free or something along the way. And I think that's a better way. You can negotiate if you think it's really high, but I always look at it this way: you get what you pay for. And if I ask them to take 50% off, what am I going to get? Thinner metal. I mean, you've got to be sensible about it too. You don't want to have it cheap and nasty. You want to have the quality as well.
Yeah, totally agree. So could you guys give us like a snapshot overview of, say, we're looking at the map of India, what regions are best for what types of materials and why?
Yeah, definitely. And do you think I can share my screen? Because I do have a map of India in front of me.
There's so many regions and so many products.
Yeah,
in
for sure.
India.
See if you can access that now, Megla.
Yeah, here it
Awesome.
is. So this is a map of India. And as you can see, a lot of the production actually happens in North India over here. And all of these products mentioned here are more of the Amazonable e-commerce products. There are other, electronic components and machinery and those things we have not covered over here. So one of the main production hubs that a lot of Amazon e-commerce sellers visit is the city of Moradabad that specializes in metal and wooden home products. In fact, this city has a really, really long history of artisans that produce these products, and specifically metal products. They started with brass, like many hundreds of years ago. They used to make brass products for the kings and queens that used to rule the country. And gradually, that skill set of producing metal products has been transferred from generation to generation. And now these artisans, make products for factories that then export these products at a large scale. And a lot of these artisans, of course, also work full-time at the factories. And these factories are, they're companies that basically understand the sourcing requirements of Western markets, of the US, of Europe. They know what kind of designs sell well. They exhibit at trade shows. They understand the colors. And then they work with the artisans to get these products made at scale and then export them to different countries. So that's sort of a history of how a lot of these different production hubs have developed. So Moradabad is for metal and wooden home products. We've got a city in the north, Khurja for ceramics, then Jalandhar for sports goods, sportswear, Ludhiana for wool products, Panipat home furnishings. Now, this is a really interesting city where there are a lot of different suppliers that do handloom products that are, things like rugs, cushion covers, a lot of decorative items in fabric, and quilts, towels. So the entire city is really focused on, home furnishings. Then we've got Jaipur, which is also a very famous tourist attraction. There are a lot of palaces and history over here. And Jaipur does a lot of wooden furniture, jewelry, specialty fabrics, specifically fabrics that are block printed. That's one thing that Jaipur is really known for. Pottery, stationery items. Kanpur is a city that does leather items. Now, leather is actually produced in three main production hubs. So there's Kanpur, there's Kolkata, and then there's Chennai. And Kanpur, the leather is mostly buff leather, and it's sort of the leather that's used for men's accessories. It's more, it looks more rough and tough. It's not the very soft leather that is used for garments. Whereas in Kolkata, there are a lot of bags that are made, specifically ladies' handbags. Delhi NCR region also has a lot of leather manufacturers that do garments, for example. And then there are other things like Tirupur is a city that really specializes in cotton textiles and apparel, specifically knitted cotton textiles. So there are things like socks and t-shirts and home furnishings. And so this is a major production hub for cotton textiles, and whether they're mostly knitted, but also woven, such as home furnishings and other types of cotton. Another one to mention is Firozabad for glass products, and there's Agra for marble and stone products. So these are the key. Oh, one last one to mention is this city over here, Alleppey, where coir products are made. Now, coir is a natural material that is basically the husk of a coconut, and the husk is taken out of the coconut, after it's dry, and then it's woven into fibers, and then they make things like coir doormats, which are very popular in the US. In fact, there's one company over here, they've been vetted by India Sourcing Network, and they are one of IKEA's largest suppliers of coir doormats. So if you go to any IKEA or even any other store in the US, all the coir doormats actually come from this little city over here in India.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. Actually, while we've got that map up, Megla, I think maybe two things. It might be good to just also have a talk about like managing logistics, seeing, now that we can sort of see the demographics in the regions.
Yeah.
Amit, can you share with us like what is the
Yeah.
best practices for managing logistics from India?
For sure. First of all, like Magda, that's like amazing. Like I didn't know all of that. So that information is super useful in my opinion. So in terms of like logistics from India, that's long to cover. But I would say that the main, in my opinion, the main problem in India compared to China or in general is the infrastructure in India. So India is a huge country in terms of like size and distance between like cities, and the infrastructure is poor. So sometimes picking up like normally in India, like terms would be FOB with the suppliers, but sometimes like a supplier can, I don't know, be in I don't know, Firozabad, or what's the name, Magda, if you can.
Firozabad, this one, the
Firozabad.
glass product.
Yeah. So it will most likely will go through Mumbai, through Nhava Sheva, and by train. And normally, like train deliveries from suppliers to the main ports can take 3 to 4 days. So you have to consider that the train situation in India is quite poor, even though there is hundreds, if not thousands of trains on a daily basis, and transportation normally take a long time. The main ports in India will be Nhava Sheva from Mumbai, Chennai, Kolkata. So it's all depend eventually on the supplier, like on the supplier location. And the difference going from India to the US in this specific example, or going from China to the US is totally different. Normally, if the port will be Mumbai, so the nearest port in the US will be New York or the East Coast, which is exactly the opposite from going from China. So the first port going from China to USA will be Los Angeles. So the transit time normally are longer. The cost from India compared to China will be more expensive, normally just due of the distance and the transit time. So the vessel have to have more gasoline, the transit time are longer, so the cost is automatically increased. So that's about logistics. I think like eventually, if you consider the long transit time it can take from suppliers to the port, the loading, the export process, the transit time to the port, so the whole journey from when the goods are being sent out from the supplier eventually to the US or to the FBA center can be longer compared to China. But again, it's all about where's going to be the port, what's going to be eventually the destination that's going to be assigned by Amazon, which FBA, and just in general keep in mind that the cost should be a little bit higher in terms of logistics from from India compared to China.
Okay, so that's something to definitely consider and to factor in when sourcing from India.
Yeah, the cycle of the transit time. So I would recommend from people manufacturing in China that from the, let's say, pickup to destination, I'm talking destination about the FBA itself. So I would consider normally about 60 days of cycle, right? So in India, I would like add at least 15 days, at least. So it's about like 75 to 19 days, the cycle from pickup to export, to arrival, and eventually to deliver to the FBA center. So the cycle should be longer, and that's something which sellers must consider when they're starting sourcing and manufacturing in India compared to China.
Yeah.
I find it doesn't take, I don't find my products take that long. I'm producing out of Moradabad, and mine take about 4 days to the port. They're usually on the boat. If I know what day my ship's going to go, so I'll make sure it's there for that day. And it's a 21-day sailing and off in New York because I go to New York. So I'm finding probably maximum of 5 weeks. I mean, and I don't find I have holdups at New York port. Like I know, when it's busy,
Right.
West Coast, there's, usually because there's so much coming in from China, so it usually flows pretty quick. So from when it's landed, it's usually cleared fairly quickly. So I very seldom have had anything longer than, sort of 5 weeks from when it left my supplier till it's, at its final destination. So,
Right. So on that, I would say that like it's depend what's going to be the FBA center and where it's going to be located, because the West Coast is totally different transit time compared to the East Coast. And also like in terms of like congestion now it's Los Angeles or New York. So basically the situation are quite well in both ports. So it's really not significant. And in terms of like, we also have to consider like in terms of like logistics in general, we have to consider now there is a huge problem in delivery to FBA directly because of Amazon changing the regulation to set an appointment. And my point of view in general in logistics is to be pessimistic and not optimistic, because everything can happen, starting from like vessel being not calling the port on a specific week, custom delays, and so on in the US side. So again, yeah, I understand what you're coming from, but in my opinion, depend really on the truly eventually on the location of the FBA. If it's going to be in the East Coast, I can agree. If it's going to be in the West Coast, so it's a totally different story. So it's all dependent.
Yeah, in India also a lot of the production happens inland. So I think that's something to consider. You must know where your factory is located and how far away it is from the port and which port will be used. So in China, most of the production happens on the East Coast, and there are ports, very near each major city. So Ningbo, for example, has its own port, even though it's not like, I mean, it is a major production hub, but there are ports all along the East Coast in China. So that's one of the reasons why products can reach quicker. Whereas, in India, it's the distance that, as you said, Amit, that products need to travel. But of course, if you're sourcing from Mumbai, let's say, the port is in the same city. So it can be, it can reach the same day. So distance is important. I would say in terms of infrastructure, yes, India's infrastructure is not as advanced as China's. For example, automation at the ports, or maybe the highways that China has built and all. But overall, I wouldn't say that the infrastructure is, I mean, it works. It's not terrible as such. The roads are totally fine. There's, of course, railways, there's bonded rail, but there's also trucks that are available. So you can truck your products to the port as well. Sometimes that can be more cost effective too than railways. So there are different options to consider for sure. And, shipping from India is definitely different than shipping from China.
Magda, do you find like most sellers working with the suppliers based on FOB or based on ex-works?
I always recommend
going from India.
Yeah, well, I would say to people, always do FOB. That's my recommendation, and a couple of reasons. Number one, you don't have to worry about how much that's another surprise cost. Because it's a bit late when you've finished your product and then you find out that the extra cost of X works getting it down to the port. But the other thing is, if it's FOB, your supplier has delivered it to the port. It should have all the appropriate paperwork to your to the logistics company that you're using. So everything should be ready to go and done. You're not going back, because it's if X works and it gets down to the port and they haven't done the right paperwork, you're the man in the middle then trying to work all that out and get those things sorted. Whereas I find it so much easier. I always do FOB. The shipper then knows exactly what paperwork they need for my products, and they'll go back to the supplier as it comes and sort it. So I find that's a much better way and safer way to do your shipping from India, because then you know what you're up for before you even start. So then you've only got to worry about the actual sea shipment itself. There's not the cost of getting it to the port. And I mean, if you're new to it and you're doing it from, it's not, say Moradabad or somewhere there where it's quite frequent, that's when you could get caught out, because it might be, in the middle of, India somewhere where it's a lot more expensive to get it to the port. So I think it's, if you do it FOB, you're guaranteed your cost.
Yeah, totally.
And Margaret and Megla, I have a question as well for you guys about, how well do the manufacturers understand Amazon sellers' requirements, in terms of the level of quality control and IP and all that sort of stuff?
Do you want to go?
Yeah, look, I think most of the suppliers, and look, we only suggest people use export focused suppliers. If you go on to like India Mart, which is one of the sites that people can go on to, they're really only either traders or selling in the local domestic market. So they're not going to know very much about the requirements. They're not going to know about anything about the paperwork required to get it into the US or wherever else. So we would say they're someone not to go to, but always make sure that you've got an export focused supplier and do your homework. And that's why, like, we have a lot of recommended suppliers on our website that we know that usually they're already doing Amazon or they're doing, retail or something. So they're shipping to the US, and quite frequently. So they know all the paperwork that's needed. They know everything that has to happen. They know about the packaging that's required. If it's Amazon, they know about a drop test. So I think it's making sure you've got the right supplier is the key. If you just pick some little, man who's, working on his own in the back of Burke and he's cheap, you probably get what you pay for because he doesn't have the experience. So that would be one question. If I was going to go to a supplier, just that I'd found through a website or something, I would be saying, do you ship to the US? Do you know all the process? Have you ever shipped into Amazon? That way then, the Amazon process isn't much to teach them, to be honest. My supplier had been shipping to the US, but he'd never, ever shipped into Amazon. And, it only took me 5 minutes to show him what to do. This is the label, this is where it's got to go. It wasn't a difficult thing to do. So I think it's getting that supplier and, obviously a supplier who's big enough to be able to make those decisions and sort through those things for you.
Yeah. And we've all heard those horror stories about, Chinese suppliers. If you have a great product and it's doing well on Amazon, then lo and behold, that factory is starting to replicate that and sell it as their own on Amazon directly, which happens far too often.
It's me.
Yeah, so I've heard so many stories. It's crazy. Does that sort of thing happen in India? Is that sort of, sort of like an open kind of field for manufacturers to take advantage of over there as well? Or do they respect your legal requirements?
So generally, we find that Indian manufacturers respect your IP more than Chinese would, and one of the reasons for that is a lot of these manufacturers, they don't want to sell directly. They don't want to do B2C. They don't want to sell on Amazon directly. Although that is changing, and Amazon themselves are actually encouraging more suppliers to sell their own brand to consumers directly on Amazon.com. But generally, we find manufacturers in India, they prefer focusing on their B2B business. That's their expertise, and they prefer doing OEM. Whereas in China, what's happening is a lot of the manufacturers are launching their own brands on Amazon because, of course, they have the advantage of manufacturing the product in-house as well. So as of now, we've seen that we haven't seen any situations where a supplier would take their buyer's product and launch it on Amazon. We haven't heard of any such cases as of now.
By the way, Magra, I have a question for you.
Yep.
How is Amazon in India? So I'm not sure even that people knows that Amazon have facility there. How strong and how significant Amazon in India for the Indian sellers or the Indian population in general?
So Amazon is very, very strong here. When Jeff Bezos came to India a couple of years ago, he announced that they would do, I think it was $5 billion worth of exports, e-commerce exports from India. And then they increased that target to $20 billion. So there are two things happening over here. One, the Amazon global selling team is very, very aggressive in terms of helping manufacturers and brands export products and list them on Amazon.com and Amazon Europe and everywhere. In fact, if you sign up for Amazon Global Selling, immediately you'll be assigned a manager who will sort of help you, and they will even do the listings for you. They'll ask you to give the content, and then there'll be a person who'll guide you through the process of how to list your products and everything. And this has happened to us. Like, we have a toy brand that we are launching in the US, and we've actually got a partnership, manager, and they keep calling us and they're like, hey, have you done your listings yet? Have you done your listings yet? So they're very, very aggressive in terms of, helping brands sell globally. And then the domestic market is also really booming. Amazon, and there's another company called Flipkart, which in fact is owned by Walmart. So Amazon and Walmart are sort of battling it over here in the e-commerce space, and they've got, almost like equal share of the e-commerce market. And together, both platforms have about, I don't know, maybe 80% or so of the e-commerce market share over here. And then there are, of course, other local, smaller e-commerce platforms that are coming up as well. But yeah, Amazon is a major, major player in India for sure, in terms of the domestic market and also selling globally.
Amazing. Amazing. I've got a question. So I want to know, and you guys will know this as well. I mean, obviously, with all your years of experience and seeing things change and grow in India, what have you seen is changing for 2023? What's shifting and moving for India in 2023?
I think there are a couple of things. First of all, there are certain categories that we are seeing more focus on, and the government is emphasizing certain categories, and there are, in general, more manufacturers in these categories. And one of them, I would say, is electronics. Now, currently, if you want to source an electronic product, and more like a consumer electronic product like headphones or charging cables, things like that, China is really the country to go for those kinds of products. There is no other country that produces those kinds of products, in bulk. Of course, there's Vietnam, and a lot of the bigger companies are actually manufacturing their products in various countries, but there are no OEM suppliers like there are in Shenzhen, for example. But we see that that's changing in India. First of all, what's happening is that the bigger MNCs like Apple, Samsung, and all, they're setting up factories here to cater to the domestic market and also, of course, export products to other countries. And that is helping build the supply chain. And once the electronic supply chain sort of builds and matures and develops, we will see more, smaller, mid-sized kind of tier 2 electronics manufacturers being set up in the country. And we're already seeing that there are some companies that are producing things like these consumer electronics, headphones, charging cables under their own brand. And currently they're mostly supplying to the domestic market. And the next step for them is going to be to export. So in the next couple of years, we really think that electronics is going to be one of the major industries that, is going to continue to expand from India. And the government of India has also set up a large budget for boosting the production of electronics. And there's also investment in a major chip plant that's happening. So that's going to change things significantly too. Another category I would say is toys and games. And that's another focus. There are lots of, big investments that are happening, and there are companies there are factories that are set up that do a lot of plastic injection kind of items, like, dolls and whatever toys that are mostly for kids. So that's another focus, not only by the government, but also there's a lot of foreign investment in toys and games too. What else, Mark? Anything else to add to that?
I think too, just like all the new materials, like the cork and the cactus fiber and pineapple fiber. There's a lot of eco-friendly products coming out of India. They're made into handbags, wallets, desk office accessories. There's lots and lots of things, I think, in those sort of, and the PET bottles made, there's a lot of mats, rugs and things made out of PET. So I think I suppose eco-friendly type products are really coming. Well, I think in the last 3 years, we've just seen so many suppliers introducing some really great new products, and they're all, moving towards eco-friendly, and also, as well as using eco-friendly materials to make them, they're turning their factories into having solar panels. So they're becoming, very eco-friendly in their manufacturing as well as the materials they're using. So I've seen that grow so much since we've, been doing the Viz shows and talking to suppliers.
That's awesome. Such a great market to sort of expand on, isn't it? When everything's eco-friendly, people love that stuff, and I think that's going to be a big niche in the future for sure.
I have a question. Like India is well known, like worldwide, I believe, with like spices, right? So
Yeah.
I know like India is one of maybe the biggest exporter of spices in the world. So do you working or do you familiar with like Amazon sellers exporting spices or not at all? Because I think that's a huge market for the Indian in general. So just that's something like I really love to cook, so that's something truly personal to me. But just wondering on that sense.
So we haven't heard of too many Amazon sellers exporting spices as such, but there are sellers doing supplements, and many of those supplements use different types of organic and natural ingredients such as turmeric or dry ginger powder, things like that.
Right.
One of the things that we've seen, and in fact, this is an Israel-based company, they do teas. And they blend teas with various ingredients, such as turmeric, etc. Ashwagandha is another such, herb. And they position these teas as having different kind of health benefits. So maybe one is a calming tea, or some other teas that have some health boosting benefits. So yeah, the tea is one category where I'm seeing Amazon sellers private label, their different blends.
Right. Interesting.
There you go. Admit your new product.
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone's dying to know, which, because I am, obviously just seeing that map and seeing the diversity on what you can produce in India. Tell us about your sourcing in India trip. Like, do you cover all of those areas? Like, tell us more about it. What can we do? What can we expect if we were to join you on the trip?
Yeah, if we had to cover all of those areas, you'd probably need to be in India for, I don't know, like a month or more.
By minimum, a month by minimum.
So how do you choose? How do you choose which ones to visit and do?
Yeah. So let me tell you about India sourcing trip. And so this is a 7-day trip that we do for Amazon and e-commerce sellers that want to source products from India. And this trip is basically, there are 3 aspects of the trip. One is learning. So we teach people how to source from India. We have a full-day conference where we talk about things like how to find and vet suppliers, how to manage quality, how to deal with cultural nuances. And we also have a lot of experts who come to the conference that are specialists in sourcing. So we've got sourcing agents, quality control companies, lawyers, any type of company that you might need when you're sourcing from India. So you've got all of this information and you've got all of these service providers under one roof. So it's just one day packed with information and resources that will help you in your India sourcing. Then we visit a trade show. So the second aspect of the trip is sourcing. And we visit a trade show that is really export focused. It's called the Indian Handicrafts and Gifts Fair. And it's held twice a year in Delhi. There are about 4,000 or so exhibitors at the fair. And the key categories are home products, gift products, some fashion, accessories as well. And all of the exhibitors at the expo are export focused. So there aren't any domestic focused companies. And as Mark mentioned, when you are sourcing from India, you do want to source from an export focused company that understands all of the requirements of overseas markets and that also has all of the licenses. Most of the companies are manufacturers. There are some, merchant exporters or trading companies as well. So that's a really good expo if you are sourcing products from India. So we spend 3 days at the expo. And the third aspect of the trip is cultural experiences. So India, of course, has so much history and culture. So we do want to give people a taste of India's culture. So we do, first of all, a Bollywood night where everyone comes, dressed up in their saris and other Indian attire, and they dance to Bollywood music. And we also do a day trip to Taj Mahal, which is one of the 7 wonders of the world. So if you're coming to India, you must visit the Taj Mahal. So we do a day trip over there as well. And so those are the 3 key aspects. But then this is like an all-inclusive trip. So we manage everything from start to finish, whether it is hotel booking, food. We do mastermind sessions in the evenings. We help you with your visa, with your ticketing. We provide SIM cards. all meals are covered, airport transfers are covered. We provide, cocktails on some nights as well. We also like to give back to society. So we sponsor one underprivileged child in India for every attendee that comes on the trip. And we basically sponsor their education for a year. And we partnered with an organization that actually runs this school for underprivileged kids. And, with this sponsorship, we're basically giving books and other stationery items to the kids for one school year. So that's something else that we do.
Beautiful. Love it. And I know that.
And then after
that, what happened?
Just want to add that after India sourcing trip, you can also visit factories. So you can go to Jaipur or Muradabad for 2 days of factory visits. And these are two key production hubs where, there's a lot of Amazonable products being produced and exported. So that's something that you can consider as well after India sourcing trip. And just to add, some of the e-commerce experts that are coming on the trip this time are, we've got Mike Jackness and Dave Bryan from Ecom Crew Premium, and then we've got Ritu Java from PPC Ninja. She's a very world famous and award-winning PPC expert. Then we've got who else have we got? Ben Leonard from the UK, Chris Thomas.
That's exciting.
Yeah, he's a good friend, and he was like in the last episode we did, like sourcing from.
Oh, you did? Okay,
Vietnam.
Ben is amazing. Yeah, he's amazing. We just love him. Yeah. And then we've got, I don't know if you know Divir Cohen from Israel.
Yeah.
He's coming over as well,
Right.
Okay.
When
cool.
is it? When is it? Let's start with when. When is it?
When can we join you?
It's October 10th to the 17th. And we are going to be doing only one trip a year. Previously, we were doing 2 trips a year, but now we're only doing 1 trip a year to India. And that's because we've launched another trip to Vietnam. So that's going to happen in spring. And then our India trip is going to be in October. So after this one, the next one is going to be in October 2024. So if people are interested, then this is the one to join.
So October 10 to 17, 2023. And then the following one,
that's right.
Yeah, is next year. And I know that you have a super duper special offer for our listeners for that trip. Meghala and Margaret, would you like to share your special offer?
Absolutely. So people can get more information about the trip on our website, indiasourcingtrip.com. And if they use the code Proboxx, that's PROBOXX, which is your brand name, of course, then they get a $300 discount on the trip. So there are 2 options. You can either opt for single occupancy in the hotel room or double occupancy in the hotel room. And double occupancy is slightly lower in price because you're sharing a room with another person. So all the prices and all of the information is mentioned on the website.
That's an amazing offer, guys. And I'm sure that trip really is it feels like if you're curious to learn more and want to get into it, that is the thing to do, is to get into that India sourcing trip because it covers so much.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people say.
So I talked like earlier this month with Steven Sedakov, I think his name, and I talked to Ben. I met him like in conferences around the world, and both like said great things about like Indian sourcing trip and Vietnam sourcing trip. So for those sellers that are listening to us, I think it can be a huge boost, and people now in general are looking to diversify like the sourcing countries, and I think like this trip can be huge boost for those sellers that are looking to diversify their sourcing countries for sure.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're running out of time. So if anybody's got any burning questions, now's your time to pop them in the chat, guys. And I know Amit has also got an amazing offer for our listeners as well. Before we wrap up, Amit, what would you like to share with the guys?
Yeah, so we will provide like 200 discount on the first shipment with Proboxx. So those who are not working with us yet. That's gonna be under India 200, and plus it would have like free compliance on the HTS code which we discussed earlier in the beginning of the webinar. So that's our gift to our audience. And again, I would like personally to thank Magda and Margaret. This was a huge information, great, valuable information, and thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. I just wanted to say as well, from me, you guys have been amazing, and we're really honored to have you too. And once we wrap this up, I'll also upload this to YouTube, and we'll put all the links below in the description with the discount codes, so that if anybody watches the recording, they can then just go to those links and get access to those discounts as well.
Thanks, Amanda.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amanda.
Start sourcing in India. Start sourcing in India, everybody.
Yes.
I'm sold. I want to
See
come
you in India.
Yeah, exactly.
You won't regret it. It's a fun trip. And I think, look, we have so many people who say the time that they've saved by going and meeting suppliers, and, you know, you've basically got, you know, a book full of, you know, products that you can go and call on. And because you've met that supplier, you can sort of say, hey, I met you at the fair. And then they want to talk to you because they know you're serious. You've outlaid some money. You've gone to their country. You're making an effort. You're not just someone sending in a random request, give me a price. Because, I mean, you know, thinking about it, a supplier probably gets 100, you know, inquiries every day for, you know, I want to source something, and people are just, you know, dreaming and thinking, oh, I'll get a price. But I think if you've actually made that trip and the commitment and you've met the supplier, you're well and truly, you know, into, you know, being legs and legs ahead in your, you know.
And you get to spend a week with experts who've got so much knowledge you can tap into at any time. It's just, it's priceless when you're getting started, for sure. Awesome, guys. Thanks, Magda, Margaret, and
Amanda.
Stay in touch.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. Thanks to everyone for joining. Bye.
Bye.
For now.